Welcome to another episode of Cancer Tamer. I'm your host, Dr. Charlie Ferrer, and today we have a few more guests for you. For those of you that saw the show last week, we were talking about male breast cancer and Male Breast Cancer Coalition, and we gave you a little information about one of the football players. Did you remember his name? It's Paul Dombrowski, in case you didn't know. So I wanted to throw that out there. And so today we have a special guest who is Lee London, who is with us today to talk about more about male breast cancer and first responders and the 9/11 tragedy that we went through here in New York City.
Hi,
Lee. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I'm Lee London. I'm from Barish McGarry Law Firm, and we represent people in the 9/11 community. And that's from first responders to workers and residents that lived, worked, responded below Canal Street on 9/11 and the months thereafter.
And you say you represent them. What do you mean by represent them? Why are you representing them?
So the toxic dust that spewed from 9/11 put in place the James Zadroga Act. And the James Zadroga Act is a two-part bill. It's broken down into two entities. On one side, you have the World Trade Center Health Program, which is free medical care for responders, survivors, residents' life if they are sick due to a World Trade Center condition. And on the other side, you have the Victim Compensation Fund, which has been extended till December 18, 2020. And we're here today to show the benefits of the program and to encourage people to join the program, because people are still getting sick that have 9/11 exposure, and we want to get the word out.
And when you say victims, what do you mean by the word victim? Not just that some individuals have died, but
exactly.
Individuals
people that are
living.
still suffering, and they're getting diagnosed with cancer every day. And it's ridiculous, the numbers of how many people that were in the exposure zone are getting diagnosed with these aggressive cancers. It's like cancer on steroids.
And one of the things that we had talked about before was the fact that you don't realize that you're sick, and it doesn't come out immediately. Like the Chernobyl nuclear power plant that went off. There's people 30 years later still being affected and coming up with thyroid cancer. I should know, I was there. And I came out with thyroid cancer.
Or 20 years or more, 40 years to get breast cancer diagnosis.
Correct.
I speak to people every day that were in the 9/11 community, and they will call me in 2013, 2014, and be perfectly healthy, but God forbid, 2015 they call me, and they've been diagnosed with this aggressive cancer that has impacted their whole lives. These 9/11 cancers come out of nowhere.
Are there different kinds?
Oh, there are many different kinds. There's male breast cancer, there's thyroid cancer, there's skin cancer, lung cancer. The World Trade Center Health Program and the Victim Compensation Fund have recognized 68 cancers coming out of the 9/11 exposure.
Wow.
The act, the James Zadroga Act, is based on one of our firm's partner, Michael Barish, his client James Zadroga, who passed away due to pulmonary fibrosis. What they found in his skin and in his lungs was ground glass, benzene. It is ridiculous, the amount of toxins that were in his lungs.
Yeah. Did you have to be in that area for a long time? Like, I remember going down 2 weeks after, and there was memorials already, and we're there for maybe 3 hours. Can that affect a person?
Very much so. There are different exposure hours, but the first responders, the residents, the workers that lived in it, worked in it from 9/11 on are the ones that are suffering today. And the biggest reason why we want to spread this is the Victim Compensation Fund is set to close in December 18th, 2020.
Right.
And the government, Congress, needs to know that people are still getting sick. This is not just a New York issue. People move away, they travel.
Right.
It's been almost 20 years since 9/11. People are still getting diagnosed with cancer.
And so does this bill, or the benefits of this bill, do you have to live in New York City to be able to access the fund? Can you, because you mentioned people move away. Plus, we also have first responders and individuals that were working there from the tri-state area. So do you have to be a New Yorker?
No,
or
you do not. This is a national World Trade Center Health Program. They have facilities all around the state, and anybody all around the state, and even we have clients in London, Canada. They moved out of the country.
Right.
They can partake in the Victim Compensation Fund.
And the people that live, let's say in Georgia, that firemen came to help.
Exactly.
That could be the same. Okay,
Yep.
I see.
And so while we're at it, I also want to introduce two of our guests here that came, and they were 9/11 survivors. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming.
Thank you for having
And
us.
if you can introduce yourselves and let our audience know who you are.
Sure. Yep. My name is Jeff Flynn, and I'm a 7-year survivor of male breast cancer. I was initially diagnosed with stage 3C, metastatic breast cancer, and unfortunately, after chemotherapy and radiation, 3 years later, it came back in a swollen lymph node, is how they found it, and now diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast
sorry to
cancer.
hear that.
Well, thank you. It's going on 7 years. I'm still standing, and they don't call it remission, but I'm under control with a drug now.
I like that
Your
word.
new normal.
Yeah, but I
Yes,
like
it's
that.
the new
Under
normal.
control, not
Yes.
this remission thing, you know?
Yeah.
But-
Yeah, we had a big show on remission,
yeah,
and
the word.
and we hate the word remission
Yes.
Yeah.
because it just implies that something's going to happen along the way, and
Yes.
it's better of the control. You have it,
Yes.
which is why we talk about cancer tamer. We tame our cancer as opposed to constantly being at war with our body.
Absolutely, and thank God that the drugs are so much better now than they were some years back. There were people, I'm sure, that passed away from the disease that didn't have the access.
Right.
And I'm on a drug right now that I think it's considered for women that are postmenopausal, and it's been incredibly effective for
What's
me.
it called?
Ibrance.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it on TV.
It's all over television.
all right.
Yeah.
So I
Which,
take
by the
Ibrance.
way, this is a quick disclaimer. We at no time tell you what prescriptions to take or what medicine is better
Only your
than the
doctor
other.
can.
Only your doctor can do that, and it's always your choice whether or not you take the medicine they prescribe or not, or you go holistic or you do the regime. So please talk to your doctor about that. We might talk about the different medicines here that an individual is on, but it's always your choice. So
Was it in both breasts? Wait, I just want to ask, was it in both breasts?
No, it's in the left breast.
okay.
Which, for whatever reason, is most males are affected in the left breast.
really,
Yeah.
Where your heart
Yeah.
is, right? Interesting.
and what about you, Nate?
My name is Nathan Spencer. I've been in remission for 13 years. I got kind of lucky. I discovered the cancer myself. I was on a treadmill at the gym, and I found an itchy spot on the right side. Okay, it was a little raised bump. I went to my primary care, and she suggested getting a sonogram, I believe it is, and one thing led to the next. I got the needle biopsy. It was a small tumor, but it was still cancerous. And I put the wheels in motion. At the time, had no reason to know anything about the VCF or the World Health Organization. And went to Sloan Kettering. I had the surgery, the chemotherapy, and the radiation therapy.
And then you had hormone therapy too?
Tamoxifen.
Right.
That's what I was on for 5 years. And 2 years later, and that was in 2006, and I said, I never equated it to 9/11. And I think maybe a lot of people go that route too. Oh, it's just something that happens. But listening to what was going on TV about 9/11 and the VCF, and so I checked into it. Someone who was also a responder, she said to me, check Michael Barish out, see what he has to say.
And the VCF is the Victim Compensation Fund.
Right.
And so was it, when you decided to do that, do you do it through your doctors? Did you do it through, did you
No.
contact someone and say?
I worked all through Michael Barish, and they guided me through the process, which some people might get, say, it's a lengthy, cumbersome process, but you know what? It helped me in establishing a health regimen for myself, going to Bellevue, getting checked out there, and for everything I was certified for, they check me out for.
Excellent. And so can you give us a little information about, and I guess Lee, you would be able to give us some information about what is the zone? Because you always see,
Yep.
I've been seeing on TV, the zone. If you lived in the zone, if you worked in the zone, if you walked through the zone, what's the zone?
The 9/11 exposure zone is south of Canal Street. So in Lower Manhattan, south of Canal Street. But there are
Battery Park.
Anywhere Lower Manhattan, south of Canal Street, if you worked, lived, responded, teachers and students. Stuyvesant High School was impacted, where they loaded barges outside Stuyvesant High School. So now our firm represents at least 30 students that have cancer that they're getting at such a young age, and that's the scary part. These are rare cancers that are aggressive, and the exposure zone, there's so many different parts. There's the Staten Island landfill where people worked, and there are also, first responders cleaned the subways underneath, outside the zone, but they would still qualify. But it's really about making that connection that Nathan was talking about. You don't know. How do I know that something over 10 years ago was due to my 9/11 exposure?
Right, and you didn't have to be there for like a year. It could have been, when you say exposure,
yes,
because you can walk in and say, well, I was there for 3 days, I'm exposed. But is there a length of time that exposure is required?
There's a requirement. So if you were caught in the dust cloud that day, and when I say dust cloud, I mean when the buildings fell, the computers melted to dust. There was so much dust and toxicity in the air that people came home covered in this dust. That exposure, you qualify immediately. So it's all about how close you were, working in the zone. Jeff, you worked in the zone for 80 hours, going through more, for years, and it is that constant exposure. We're trying to get the benefits out there for people just like Jeff that worked in the zone and like Nathan to make that connection.
And what about their families? Because a lot of the times you figure, well, the wife or the husband or the children weren't there. They were safely outside of the zone or living in a different state. And so would they also qualify to be able to tap into or get evaluated, I guess, because you need to be evaluated?
Well, the World Trade Center Health Program is where you're going to go for your evaluations. The Victim Compensation Fund is where you really go to get made whole again. You get monetary compensation, out-of-pocket medical expenses, loss of earnings. These cancers, these respiratory conditions force people out of their job. And the way the families benefit is you get benefits, wrongful death benefits, because you have partners that pass away, and now you have somebody not bringing in the funds to your family, and you can make a claim to get that funds back to you.
Okay. So let's say, what about the people that worked there that were immigrants? What happens to those people that are getting sick and dying?
So we have many, many clients. It doesn't matter what color you were, your immigration status. If you were there and you were working and you were in the zone, you can apply to the Victim Compensation Fund.
That is
because
so
if
good
you're
to hear.
suffering and you're hurting and you have these horrible cancer diagnoses, the benefits are there and the help is there.
I'm happy to hear that. That's great.
And there's quite a few individuals and firms that are doing that. We will have some information on our website, so if you're interested in getting more information about that, please visit our website at cancertamer.org. It's always up to you. Check out, scour the internet, check and see where you can get information, and always connect with us. What information or what advice, I guess, and I guess I would direct this to you gentlemen, what advice would you give to someone who is experiencing, and especially since you're men, and you mentioned that you were diagnosed with breast cancer, what advice can you give to other men out there that are experiencing the same?
The first thing that I would say to anyone that had worked downtown or was downtown in the zone would be to sign up for the VCF, because and it's very common to develop cancer much later. So with me, it was like 9.5 years later that I had my cancer diagnosis. So if you were there, sign up. Just get that portion out of the way.
Just to at least safeguard your ability to be able to tap into it later.
Yes, absolutely.
Because issues may not develop.
until years later.
Until
Yeah.
years later.
So that would be my first recommendation. The other one would be, and
Go to any law firm that's handling those.
any law firm, but I'll just say that Lee and his firm just, they just did it was life-changing for me. They did a tremendous job for me. Not to put a plug for them, but
Yeah, because we're not allowed to do that.
okay.
That's why I'm going, we're not allowed to do that. So I don't want the show not to go on because we
Right.
do that. That's
Understood.
why it's one of those things where, you can get information from our website or
Right.
you can
Everything
look
will
on
be
the
there.
internet
Sure. Understood.
and get someone.
So then
So-
the other thing I want to mention is, and this is the main reason that, and I've done quite a bit of this, is that males are, they're not apt to check themselves.
Right.
And, whether you were down there or not, you should really check yourselves. Once in a while, check yourself in the shower for lumps. And if you do see or feel something, go get yourself checked. And there's nothing wrong with talking about it. It was always considered a woman's disease, and males are embarrassed and they don't like to talk about it. So, I felt compelled that if I did survive, because I had a really bad cancer, that I would try to get the message out.
That's great. I commend you.
Thank
I commend
you.
both of you.
Thank you.
Well, I concur with Jeff 100%. And the big thing is, like in his case, 9.5 years, you say, it's got to be related to something else. Don't assume. That was my message. Do not assume. If you don't feel right, if you find a lump here or there, it doesn't even have to be the breast. It could be whatever. If it's something that doesn't feel right and you were in that area at the time, go check it out.
Yeah.
Register, go see a doctor, let them be the bearer of good or bad news.
I'm curious, did you have second opinions? Or did you just stick with the one opinion?
I didn't need it.
Right.
It was conclusive.
Okay.
Mine too.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right.
And the
That's
fact that
fine.
I was there, I don't know how long Jeff spent there, but I was there over a year afterwards.
So what kind of work did you do down there?
I was an
9/11?
executive in a
Oh.
large commercial bank.
Okay, and what did
Well, at the time, I was the strategic account manager for Goldman Sachs,
Ah.
and I was also acting as a service manager. So I had the staff and the crew that were supporting all of the financials, the global financials, all of them down there, Deutsche Bank and Bank of New York and Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, anybody that was downtown that was affected with 9/11 that used our equipment, we were supporting them. So I spent quite a bit of time downtown, building to building.
Oh, boy.
And you never thought of, you don't, I'm not accusing or anything, but you never think of walking around with a gas mask or protective
even give them out.
clothing or
Goes back to the story
even,
where they told us it was safe.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was
Yep.
safe.
That's like, don't leave
Yes.
the building,
Yep.
don't worry.
No, we were told by
You heard of that?
high-ranking politicians that the air quality was tested and it was safe. And
I
the
did not
fact
know
that
that.
the carcinogens were blowing out of the ground, that was just.
Well, it wasn't even high-ranking politicians. It was, there was a politician that said it, but it was the Environmental Protection Agency came out and made the statement that the air is safe to breathe. And
boy.
ironically, they opened Wall Street 2 days later.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So.
yeah.
And they let people
So
walk
bad
around
information.
there,
There were
tourists.
a lot of tourists there taking pictures and
Yeah.
videos and everything. What about them? But
I know.
That's
I
another
was
story.
there.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, and I, when it happened, I was actually supposed to have moved here, and I canceled my trip to come here in August.
So you would have moved from Chernobyl to downtown.
I would have moved. I was in Washington at the time, and I was moving here, and I was like, no, I'm not moving. And I remember that my son actually was the one that called me and said, Mommy, you need to see what's happening in New York, because my family was here. And we were moving to be with my sisters, and it was like, okay, what's happening? And I'm looking, and I was shocked. I was like, wow, that's great, graphics. Like, how did they get that? And
Yeah, right.
and the lady's like, no, miss, that's really
reality.
happening. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, what the hell is going on? And it was just a shock. And I think a lot of individuals were in that shock zone because things like that don't happen in New York.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's There was really never an attack that I'm aware of on the mainland.
Yeah.
So, you know, I
We
mean,
were lucky all those years.
yeah, we were lucky all those years, and you know, I experienced that with, you know, people in a state of shock after the 2 planes went in. You know, I was standing on the street, and there were people that were just, you know, couldn't believe it was surreal that it had happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even watching it, and I'm going, oh, that's just a phony news announcement.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
No.
Yeah.
No, and there was a lot of bad news that was coming out. It was a small plane, and
Exactly.
initially, so
No one really knows.
Yeah.
yeah.
So what else can we know, I guess, what else should we know about being in the zone, about getting educated, about victim compensation, or about, you know, what to do? And we don't have a medical physician here to be able to give us that information, but you know, if you're curious about whether or not you fall into that zone, whether or not something might happen, then you start with your doctor.
Well,
And
the biggest thing is you have to realize that these conditions can come out of nowhere. So the people, you know, there are a lot of individuals that I get calls from that were in the zone, they have exposure, but they're perfectly healthy. That is amazing. You're one of the lucky ones, but you need to protect yourself.
Right.
You need to contact the World Trade Center Health Program, make an appointment for an evaluation, just to be cautious, because I get calls every day of I was perfectly healthy, and then out of nowhere, they get diagnosed with something, and you want to be protected at that time. You don't want to have to start from the beginning at that time.
Right.
And also, joining and registering, you're showing the need, you're showing Congress that there's a need for this program. There's a need for the World Trade Center Health Program, and there's a need for the Victim Compensation Fund. The more people that join, the more people they'll say, wait a minute, we need to get this funded and extended. So the Victim Compensation Fund is set to expire December 18th of 2020.
So next year.
Next year,
Right.
but legislation is in. It's called the Never Forget the Heroes Act, 9/11, permanently funding the Victim Compensation Fund.
That
and
is
that is the
great.
biggest thing to support right now.
And show the children of the responders, of the survivors,
Right, so they're covered,
of
yeah.
them, because it goes on from one generation to the next.
Well, no, it's only if you were in the exposure zone. So
No, but that's what I'm saying. Those individuals that were there. So, you know, like Jeff and Nathan are older adults, but you might have somebody that was 10 years old when it happened.
Exactly. 10 years old
And
in the
so
zone.
now,
Exactly.
you know,
Now,
20 years later, 30 years later,
Exactly.
they're starting to see issues.
Yep,
And so
exactly.
what will happen with them? And so they'll be able to,
Yep, they'll be
to go
protected
and
too.
register now and just say, hey, I was there.
Yep.
I'm not symptomatic. There's nothing wrong with me, but just in case.
just in case.
Down the
and
road.
it shows that, you know, they're one of the lucky ones. But God forbid 10 years from now they get diagnosed, we want to make sure the benefits are there. You know,
Yeah.
the first responders ran in. They didn't question it. They
No.
ran in to help. Jeff, you know, Nathan, you guys had to go back into the zone. The EPA said the air was safe. We want to make sure the government sets up a program. God forbid anything happens in the future.
Why did you go back to the zone?
Well, my accounts were down there. That's
Oh.
what my work was,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
and they needed the support at the time.
Your office was open at
Well, actually,
where was
my
your-
office was uptown.
Oh.
Not uptown, it was in Midtown,
Oh,
but
wow.
I spent most of my time downtown because that's where my clients were.
Uh-huh. And your office building, was it
My
still
office
standing?
building was on Broadway and Fulton Street.
Oh, okay, I see.
And the day the event happened, we left and we were notified to go to our disaster recovery site, which is near Giant Stadium.
Oh.
We were there for a month, set up operations. Then we were told to come back day after Columbus Day. And we were there I was there until the following October.
I see.
And the pile burned for 90 days.
Yeah, that's right.
There
Underground.
was a
coming up,
fire for
everything.
90 days, and there was, you know,
Yes.
smoke and ash and
total toxins.
toxins. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to interject my,
Of course.
my personal experience with the, not just the Victims Compensation Fund, but the World Trade Center Health Program. In the return of my cancer, where I was on tamoxifen for 3 years, and the tamoxifen was ineffective. So they took me off the tamoxifen and they put me on the Ibrance. The Ibrance is it's a fortune. I believe it's $12,000 a month. So when I turned 65, And I had to retire early because, I was sick. So, and my company offered an early out where I had 2 years of full benefits. So my company paid for the drug the first 2 years I was on it. But as I was coming off my company benefits, going on the Medicare, we had some unbelievable copays. Like the copays would have been life-changing for us until I was certified by the VCF, and the World Trade Center Health Organization now pays my copays. So, which is why it's so important
To sign up.
to sign up, because God forbid you are affected with it later in life. It can be financially devastating.
Right. And there is that part of, deciding for yourself, well, do I get my meds or do I eat this month?
Yeah, that's
do I
what
get my
happens.
meds or
That's
do I
exactly
live
right.
in my car?
That's
Yeah.
Do I
exactly
get
right.
my meds or do my
great
kids
point.
go without clothes and without
Right.
shoes and so on, which is so important. So one last time, because we're going to be wrapping this up. So please tell me the zone again so that people know what the zone is.
So Lower Manhattan, south of Canal Street.
So everything from Canal Street going back towards
Yep.
like
The ferry?
Battery Park
Exactly.
and the ferry.
Exactly.
Okay.
But also, for first responders, there's the
Right.
Staten Island landfill. If you cleaned and worked on equipment outside the zone, covered in the dust. So there are other areas, but south of Canal Street in Lower Manhattan.
And when we talk about first responders, we're talking about the police,
Police,
the
cops,
firemen.
firefighters, Con Edison, getting the city back up and
EMS,
running,
everything.
EMS, there is
Nurses,
volunteers, there is 400,000 people were affected by this. Workers, first responders, students, teachers, 400,000 people. And it's ridiculous because these cancers are rare, and one stat I'm just going to throw at it, 1 in 100,000 men get male breast cancer. So out of the 400,000 people, let's just say 4 should get male breast cancer. We have 30 clients with male breast cancer. So it just shows this type of condition is just, and toxins.
It's there.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of our show. So thank you so much for attending.
no,
thank
thank
you,
you.
gentlemen,
Thank
for
you for
being
having us.
here.
Yes, thank you for having
If
us.
you're interested in more information, please contact us at info@cancertamer.org. Go to our website, cancertamer.org. And of course, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to leave it on there. We'll be running the show on the website. So
Yeah.
it'll be there.
We'll be
Thank you
there.
so much for joining us.
Thank
I'm
you
Dr.
again.
Charlie
Thank you.
Ferrer.
Appreciate it. I'm
Thank
Deborah
you.
Thanks for
Santulli-Barone.
watching.
Thank you.